spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna change it, baby.
No spin new source.com. From the beginning. And as president, you will not see a dime of increased taxes. Not one dime. Not your payroll tax. The best idea, I think, is to raise the cap on the payroll tax. Not your income tax.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, isn't it?
Not your capital gains tax.
If the truth about Benghazi were to come out now, I don't think that this man would make it through his term. I think he would be impeached.
Christ into my life, I learned that my sins could be redeemed, and that if I placed my trust in Jesus, then he could set me on a path to eternal life. When I submitted myself to his will.
Hello, thanks for joining us. This is the October Monthly Report. I'm Kari Ilonummi. This is NoSpinNewsSource.com. Now this is a show today that will be extremely exciting. We have video footage, commentary, news articles, and a whole lot more to discuss and variables to consider. This show is going to rock many of your worlds. You're going to be forced to see life from a new light and perspective. That's the thing that some folks don't like about NoSpinNewsSource.com, is that we don't just go with the base right-left paradigm bias. Here at NoSpinNewsSource.com, we seek the truth. We don't care who's right, we don't care who's wrong, we don't care who they are, what they call themselves, or where they come from. We say it how it is. So, we're at the point in the road when some people are finding themselves having to stand up. And one such sheriff is doing just that. So one sheriff's comments are gone viral, stating that he will not enforce, and even go further, not just refuse to enforce what would be federal gun laws if there would be such factors come into play, or international perhaps, within his county, but he would even go as far as protecting what would be the citizens of his county and fighting back with what would be, he stated, it would become a, quote, civil war, unquote. So check out this video footage of this, and we will see you in a moment.
As the sheriff of Wycomico County, I made a vow and a commitment that as long as I'm the sheriff in this county, I will not allow the federal government to come in here and strip my citizens of their right to bear arms. I can tell you this, if they attempt to do that, it will be an all-out civil war, no question about it.
It's these comments about gun control by Wycomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis that have gone viral. Lewis says he's received hundreds of emails in support of his pro-Second Amendment stance. He also testified against the state's Firearms Safety Act, which passed the General Assembly last year. Maryland Attorney General Doug Gansler says Lewis's comments would seem to run afoul of the state's Firearms Act, which he says is constitutional under the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Second Amendment. Here's the rest of that video, which we are allowed to show you under a Creative Commons license.
On the Eastern Shore, our culture, our lifestyle is to hunt and fish. We have the best waterfowl hunting of anywhere around. Ducks, geese. I love hunting ducks and geese. I've been a rabbit hunter, squirrel hunter, dove hunter, quail hunter. I've hunted with dogs my whole life. And I certainly have done my share of deer hunting. I've been holding a gun in my hand since I was probably old enough to walk. Really have. It's part of my everyday life to be armed. I don't go anywhere without my gun. We love our way of life down here, and it's a simplistic way of life that we live, and our guns hurt no one, literally no one, if they're left alone. You put a gun in the hands of any bad person, sure, it can be used as a weapon, absolutely. We need to get the guns out of the hands of convicted felons. We need the guns out of the hands of bad people. But we do not need to strip law-abiding citizens of their Second Amendment right to bear arms. That I get upset over. I really do.
For Delmarva now.
And thank you for sticking with us. Around 100 French farmers have burned what would be the tax office and agricultural insurance office to the ground in protest at falling living standards, which they blame on red tape. The farmers are reported to have used their tractors to prevent firefighters and trucks from reaching the blaze, an action from the French Prime Minister Manuel Valls described as particularly shocking, unquote. Now, medical martial law has been declared in what would be Sierra Leone, and we need to discuss what would be Ebola, which these victims are being hunted down house to house as like fugitives, as what would be a medical martial law has literally been declared throughout these nations. This is an epidemic beyond proportion, beyond what would be that's even being stated in the media. And we've even brought back some of these patients and folks back to the United States, several patients already, which could become a pandemic and an outbreak within the United States, God forbid. But I can assure you that if the brakes are not immediately put upon this Ebola situation, if we're not able to get this under wraps and under in control over the next few months, this is going to become a huge issue beyond any proportion, beyond our wildest dreams. We're going to see third world nations being wiped off the map. We have some countries already stating, including foreign ministers, that they are worried about their, quote, national identity being removed. The identity of an actual nation is threatened by this disease. So this is absolutely horrible, it's shocking, and we better hope this does not, or anything similar, come to the United States of America and become a pandemic here. That'll be a perfect excuse to round people up, throw them in camps, even if you're suspected of it, force vaccines, maybe take away your guns too. You never know. So, up to 40 Americans who fought along ISIS have returned home, says U.S. Congressman Tim Bishop, Democrat of New York. Mysterious unidentified spying towers being found across what would be Washington, D.C. The House approves a plan to arm and train what would be the ISIS to fight ISIS. How does that work? The U.S. also gave what would be Obama the authority and signed on to it as well. After Obama asked them to give what would be the initial $500 million to the so-called, quote, moderate Syrian rebels, unquote, that are fighting, murdering, robbing, raping their way through Syria in order to overthrow what would be President Assad. These are the folks we're working with and helping. So this is illegal, what would be beyond any, regarding international law, sovereign nation states law, regarding UN treaties. It's considered terrorism if someone were to try to come here and overthrow our president or governor or whoever. It would be terrorism. And it's the same thing when we're doing that too, overseas. So we're really propping these people up to overthrow Assad. And remember, you know, President Obama was trying to get what would be the congressional consent. Well, maybe not trying so hard for consent, but trying to get the people and certain factors of consent, I guess, to a degree, to be able to initiate what would be airstrikes and overthrow Assad over a year ago, and he didn't get that. Now, in the name of ISIS, ISIL, and this and that, he just got what would be exactly what he wanted, which was the American people to support his bombing campaign using the United States Air Force as ISIS, Al-Qaeda's Air Force now, basically, as what we're doing overseas. So we're killing some people of ISIS to give other people of so-called ISIS money. What does that mean? I know this is confusing. Sounds like double talk, typical politician stuff, but this here is an inside job, folks. And it's going to be very confusing because every time you learn one name or word, it's going to change. Kind of like, well, we'll just keep it simple. So anyway, it's going to get very, very nasty. Ron Paul's audit, the Fed bill, prevails in the House. What will the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid do? That's a good question. He said in the 80s he was for this and needed it to happen, but now he's Senate Majority Leader. What will he do? That will be interesting. Democrats join GOP in blasting the Benghazi bungling. Sending American troops to combat Ebola in Liberia is, quote, an absolute misuse of the U.S. military, unquote, contends retired Lieutenant General William G. Boykin himself. At this point in the road, let's check out what would be this video of Professor John Lott. What will be author and whatnot discussing with George Norrie of Coast to Coast, President Obama, when they were students and knew each other somewhat once upon a time. Let's check out this interview of Professor Locke.
That's true. You know, there have always been some concern that this administration wants to do away with guns. Is there any foundation to that at all, John?
Well, I knew Obama. I mean, we both taught at the
You were in Chicago. That's right.
Right. And the first time I met Barack, I went up and introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're the gun guy." and I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And he told me, he said, "I don't believe people should own guns." And I said, well, because I knew he was helping out with the city of Chicago lawsuit against gun makers. I said, well, maybe we can have lunch sometime and talk about it. He just kind of grimaced at me and turned around and walked away. And you know, I know other people in the Obama administration, academics that I've known for a number of years, and I think these guys, you know, they're tied up with lots of other issues right now on health care and
economy,
global warming, and the economy. And I just think it's a matter of time, once they can get those things off the table, that they would move to do other laws.
So you think it's possible they would go after your guns?
Well, I think they'll be as restrictive as they can be. I think there are a number of types of laws that they've talked about. Holder last year talked about reinstituting the assault weapons ban, and I think if they thought that they could get it through, and they thought that they had, you know, weren't taken up with all these other issues, I think they would do it.
Did he all but ignore you at the university?
Well, you know, there are lots of people there at the university who disagree with you, but they like to argue and talk. Cass Sunstein, who works for Obama right now, fairly well-known liberal law professor, I must have had over for dinner like 15, 18 times while he was there, and we would get together for dinner, and we'd argue for a couple hours and just have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
But
no winners, right?
Yeah, no winners, but it was just fun. And didn't enjoy the process of talking about things. He was much more kind of ideological and just didn't to deal with people that he disagreed with.
Were you surprised when he became president?
You know, it's kind of weird, somebody that you've known like that, to become president.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess I was pretty shocked. I think the thing that surprised me the most was how different he seemed to be portrayed in the media than the guy that I knew. You know, maybe it had been 10 years since I'd really spent any time near him, and people can change in 10 years, surely, but I guess I just didn't think that he would have changed as much as he did.
Well, his dwindling popularity may show you that you indeed did know him. The way he was thinking.
He was one of the most left-wing people that I knew around the University of Chicago, and you know, that's saying something in academia.
Yeah.
That, and also, as I say, it was just quite different in the sense that he just wasn't willing to go and talk to you about issues. He didn't enjoy the normal academic process of discussing
of
things.
Dialogue. He didn't like.
Right.
Was there ever any question about his birth certificate?
No, I mean, nobody talked about those types of things. I mean, who cared where everybody was from if you're there? I mean, one thing I will say about Obama is he was never really brought in to be a regular visitor or lecturer on the faculty. The thing is, when he was brought in, some of the faculty objected because they didn't think that he was strong enough, but they were told he's not going to ever try to be a regular member of the faculty. They knew he was going to run for public office even before he stepped foot on the University of Chicago campus. You know, being a part-time lecturer where you don't have to do 3 hours a week.
Come back to your phone, by the way, John. Come back to your phone.
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. It gives you a lot of time to go and do lecture, talks, community outreach,
Sure.
go and organize for political activity, and so it was kind of viewed as kind of the ideal platform for him to get involved in politics.
Well, and I didn't want to make this a President Obama moment here, but I was very curious over your very accurate portrayal of what they may do to guns one day when some of their other major issues go away.
Yeah. No, it's worrisome. Well, I mean, I think the big thing right now is just what he's doing to the courts. Sonia Sotomayor was somebody who, even in her hearings, claimed that she didn't believe that individuals had a right to self-defense. And you can see that in a couple of the appeals court cases that she's ruled on. It seems pretty clear where she's coming from. And I think the types of judges that Obama's putting on the courts and the appeals court level are going to reflect similar views.
Very interesting. John, we're going to take some phone calls with you in the remaining half hour that we have. So I'm George Norrie, back in a...
And welcome back to the show. Senator Rand Paul stated that Obama's request to arm rebels in ISIS fight was, quote, a mistake, unquote. Russia to boost Crimea troop numbers, worries of over-military buildup at borders, government spies on journalists with weaponized malware, according to a new WikiLeaks revelation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's next-generation identification system of biometric database, reliant on tens of millions of facial recognition records, is now fully operational, the FBI stated on Monday. The NGI system, as it's called after 3 years of development, is billed by the FBI as a new breakthrough for criminal identification and data sharing between law enforcement agencies. This effort is a significant step forward for the criminal justice community in utilizing biometrics as an investigative enabler, quote, unquote, the FBI stated. The NGI database contains over 100 million individual records that links a person's fingerprints, palm prints, iris scans, and facial recognition data, along with personal information like their home address, age, legal status, and other potential compromising details. And this is tied into and taps into directly, this NGI system, with the street camera lights that you drive through. So as you're at the street light and you're going through, those are scanning your face through your windshield at every street corner that has these in cities of America, and it's been doing this already for the last couple of years. It's just now official and known about and operational to the point to where they have to acknowledge it. Now, kind of like in Seattle, for instance, last November, I confronted a very high up police officer at what would be the Seattle Center. And I confronted him and stated about what would be the spying cell phone tower variable that they have in what would be Seattle. It's monitoring people's cell phones and movements and a lot of things. And he was shocked that a regular citizen knew about it. And I explained to him, I said, if you really believe in the Constitution and the law, you shouldn't just be there to bust the butts of what would be the citizens who allegedly go against and commit some kind of a crime, but you have to also be there to protect the innocents and protect the rule of law, the Constitution, and our rights as well. And when I confronted him and I let him have it, this other cop made some excuse and went off on a little thing at first saying, oh, give a speech at city council or this or that. And I said, yeah, it's your job as well to not just to enforce the law, but to enforce what would be the actual rule of law and the Constitution fully and whatnot. And this individual officer that I put on the spot, he put his head down in shame because he knew what I was saying was right. And he was shocked, as I mentioned, that someone knew about it. But moving onward in the show, Ukraine hosts military drills led by United States and joined by NATO. A total of 1,300 troops from 15 nations, either active NATO members or would-be members, have come together for a military exercise in Ukraine on the border, and this is forcing the Russian situation to where on the other side of Russia, as they see thousands of troops amassing over here on the other side of the border, well, obviously they're forced, just in case, it may just be a military drill, and it was, It wasn't an invasion of what would be NATO into Russia. But they don't know that. And if we, the United States, saw a huge military buildup by any nation or nations on the north or south border, 5,000 troops or 3,000 or 1,000 or whatever, we would automatically have troops on the other side prepared to counteract just in case that military operation goes live. So, as I was discussing, ultimately, and I'm not, trying to like take up for Russia here, but we do have to understand, when they see thousands of troops amassing on the other side of their border, they don't really know why it is. So they have to be prepared as well. And then they have, obviously, thousands of troops amassed on the other side, and then you have this buildup, this powder keg, and all it takes is one spark to go off. One soldier, one person, nervous, that trips and pulls the trigger accidentally. And someone, all of a sudden, you got a war. World War III could be sparked off like that. Why hasn't Obama kept his promise to declassify the 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report? That's right. Why? It's a good question. On the bottom floor of the United States Capitol, new underground visitor center, there is a secure room where the House Intelligence Committee maintains highly classified files. One of those files is titled Finding, Discussion, and Narrative Regarding Certain Sensitive National Security Matters. It's 28 pages long. In 2002, the administration of George W. Bush excised those pages, what would be from the Joint Congressional Inquiry report. According to some members of Congress, which really can't discuss much about it, this information is crucial to telling us who really funded the 9/11, what would be terrorist attacks. Seattle to fine residents who throw out too much compostable foods. That's right, the city voted to issue $1 fines to people who have too much food scraps in what would be their waste basket. Now, pistol-packing preacher catches a thief in the act in Baytown. Let's check this news article out.
Tonight, that pastor is telling us how he caught the woman who he says had been stealing packages off her neighbor's doorsteps. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Philip Mena. Local 2's Sion Rhodes just spoke to that pastor and the husband of the suspected thief. She joins us now live from Baytown.
And Philip, Baytown police call Lori Ferguson a habitual thief. This pastor decided it was time that someone broke her of that habit.
A thief is somebody that's greedy and going to continue to do what they do. So I said this day, I'm going to watch for her.
Pastor Benny James Holmes says this surveillance video shows 52-year-old Lori Ferguson stealing from him. This wasn't the first time cameras captured Ferguson's alleged crimes. Baytown police say this is her in late June, stealing from another home.
This has been going on for a long time. I call her terrorizing the neighborhood.
Pastor Holmes decided he wasn't going to let it happen again.
And I put some dummy boxes out. And sure enough, around about 5:10 in the afternoon, here she comes, thinking that she was about to receive her gift again. But this time, she met the homeowner, which was me. But when I came out of my house and she turned the corner here, she met me and my gun. And I put her on the ground and began to tell her what she was doing. She would say she wasn't. She was looking for a dog. I said, well, guess what? You just found your dog. Wow, wow, wow.
Pastor Holmes held Ferguson until police arrived to arrest her.
The Bible tells us that we're not to steal, and if we do, steal no more. But eventually, you're going to get caught, and that's what she did. She got caught, and now she has to pay the price.
And I talked to Lori Ferguson's husband today. He told me that he has personally apologized to the pastor on his wife's behalf and that his wife needs help and he's trying to get that help for her right now. He says he hopes one day they'll be able to attend the pastor's church. We're live in Baytown tonight. Sion Rhodes, KPRC, Local 2.
Never underestimate the power of the Lord.
Now, if I were to tell you that the border with Mexico, the south border of the United States, was so insecure that you could be a big, strong man dressed as Al-Qaeda, holding a huge Al-Qaeda flag with one hand and what appears to be a severed head in the other. walking across the desert, over the border. If I were to tell you you could do that and get away with it, would you say, no way, Kari? Would you say, let's see it? Would you want proof that someone could get away with doing this in broad daylight, dressed as Al-Qaeda, with a head in their hand? Well, why don't we see former United States military Sergeant Joe Biggs doing just that to illustrate this point of just how secure your border is not. And we'll see you right back after this break. Infowars.com.
Have issued a terror alert and believe an attack by the terrorist group ISIS is imminent on or before September 11th, the 13th anniversary of the worst attack on American soil. InfoWars investigates just miles from the center of El Paso, Texas, where we were able to cross the river from Mexico into America. Thousands of other than Mexicans cross our borders from over 75 different countries. InfoWars has shown you time and time again that our borders are intentionally left unsecured, and now these ISIS psychopaths are ready to strike at targets on American soil. We know our government has created and funded ISIS, so whether or not this is a real threat or a false flag, the globalists are now one step closer to their endgame, stripping us of all our liberties. So we dress up like an ISIS jihadi to be as obvious as possible, to show and to illustrate just how wide open the border really is.
Thank you, Obama, for leaving your southern borders open so ISIS can terrorize America. ISIS thanks you, President Obama. We claim this land for Sharia law.
Welcome back to the show. Now, it doesn't make sense. ISIS, Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, ISIL, they're our enemies. We're bombing them. But our president's asking for $500 million to fund them as well. This must be getting really confusing to those of you out there that haven't been following this, that don't understand the double talk, that don't understand certain national security matters and how things really work. Bump in the night. Most of you, your news is CNN, MSNBC, Fox, or some mainstream little lit issue where people aren't going into dark alleyways to get their information or off the grid. Well, I'll go wherever it takes to get the information, wherever I have to go to get the truth, because we care about the truth. So the question is ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda our friends, or are they our enemy? Well, we're funding them. Our president's having what would be lunch with them and whining and dining. Obviously, what would be John McCain likes him a lot. He even says that he vetted ISIS, and he knows these folks are trustworthy and we can trust them. You want to find that out for yourself? Let's hear what would be Senator John McCain discussing that now. Thank you.
Senator John McCain. Senator, according to the Hill this weekend, the Syrian rebels agreed to a ceasefire with ISIS. Does that change the equation any?
Well, they haven't, and they're still being slaughtered, and they are still a core of brave young men, many of whom have already died, that are still fighting for freedom, and I believe that they can still be viable over time. But let me say, I've just heard and it may be wrong, that no Arab country has agreed, Middle Eastern country has agreed to engage in air or ground support against ISIS. This is a direct result of American indecision and lack of credibility. When they see the President of the United States compare in Somalia with a 30,000-man terrorist organization with tanks and equipment and the size of Indiana, and compare that to Yemen and Somalia, they don't believe the president is either serious or he's deluded. One of the two. And when you talk about a coalition, I think you're going to have great difficulty, Sean, in getting any Middle Eastern country to cooperate in any fashion because of the decisions the president's made, including the commitment to bomb Syria and not to. And by the way, I could show the president targets on the map today that he could be bombing and killing ISIS people, the same ones that carried out this hideous decision. Why the delay in a bombing campaign in Syria? I'd be very interested to know.
A couple of things as we've been reporting tonight. Number one, no, they said in the New York Times, no shock and awe. I think we've already telegraphed there's no boots on the ground. Now we're saying it's not going to be an overwhelming campaign. Then we don't have any allies that have publicly joined with us, no Arab countries. And on top of that, I am concerned about this report about Syrian rebels and the ceasefire with ISIS. Senator,
that's not true. Well, it's not true. It's not true. Whether I don't care about the report. I know these people intimately. We talk to them all the time. But also let me point out that if we are going to conduct a conflict the way you are describing it, and I'm afraid that's the case, this is reminiscent of Vietnam, the gradual escalation that ended up in one of the worst defeats that America has ever suffered.
Let me ask you about what your colleague Rand Paul said about it this morning. He said it's a mistake to arm them. Most of the arms that we've given the so-called moderate rebels have wound up in the hands of ISIS because ISIS simply takes it from them or it is given to them, and we mistakenly actually end up giving it to some radicals. Look, things are very...
Has Rand Paul ever been to Syria? Has he ever met with ISIS? Has he ever met with any of these people? No. We're going to have a fight because it's patently false. This is the same Rand Paul that said we didn't want to have anything to do with anything to do in the Middle East, by the way. I don't want to get in a fight with him at all. Yeah. But it's not true. I know these people. I'm in contact with them all the time.
Then let me ask you this.
And he is not.
Senator,
and he is not.
I know your background. I believe you when you say you have sources on the ground. But I've got to be clear, because I was a little surprised. It was in the Hill. It was in this weekend. They cite the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights monitoring events for the United Kingdom, and what they said, the groups agreed to a non-aggression pact in which they promised not to attack each other. You're saying this report in the Hill by this group is false, and you know for a fact.
I know for a fact that the Free Syrian Army is being attacked by both Bashar Assad and by ISIS, and they have suffered hundreds of casualties at the hands of both. I know that they are not giving up their fight. I know that we can make them strong and resilient, but arming and equipping 5,000 a year in the face of a 30,000-man army means that the United States of America is not serious.
Listen, I'm not saying that these are easy questions to answer. I mean, we can go back to arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan many years ago with Stinger missiles, some of which have later been used and propped up and used against Americans. It seems like a very delicate question. Do we need to examine it further, more deeply, and know the people whose hands these weapons are going to get in? Certainly you're concerned about that.
Well, I'm concerned. By the way, I know of no instance where the Mujahideen injured a single American.
No, not them. The weapons ended up in the hands of...
the weapons. Yeah. I don't know where the weapons did that either. You'll have to help me out on that. But second of all, I do know these people. I know what they're committed to. I know the fact that the president refused to help them 2 years ago over the recommendations of his Secretary of Defense and head of CIA was a drastic and terrible decision to make.
And welcome back to the show. So apparently Senator John McCain is in love with ISIS. So you remember that. When the time comes that there are killings in the United States of America, you remember our congressman here in Washington State, Rick Larson, senators such as John McCain, representatives such as Nancy Pelosi of California, Speaker of the, what would be former Speaker, and what would be Minority Leader, Pelosi, as I mentioned. These other folks praise and are giving money to these folks. So remember this when they come and do murderous acts in the United States. Now, how do I know they're going to do acts of murder in the United States? Because they have stated that. I'm going to show you video footage right now on what would be Fox News of one of these individuals stating that expect this Islamic extremist terrorism to come to a theater near you right now. I'm also going to show you as well what would be video footage of a Texas sheriff that stated that he knows for a matter of fact that ISIS is the United States. They have found what would be proof, evidence. So here we go. We're going to check out these videos right now, and we'll see you after this break.
Come on, listen to this. I don't want your Sharia law, and neither does anybody in Great Britain that has a break. You will have no choice if I show it. It's coming to a place near you.
This coming Thursday will mark 13 years since the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. And now, with the dramatic rise of ISIS in the Middle East, some Americans are worried that a bloody attack could happen again on U.S. soil. As CNN's Gene Casares explains, there is reason to be concerned.
This ISIS group, they're smarter, probably the most evolved terrorist group we've ever seen.
I am concerned, but I don't think we can gauge where it'll be or when it'll be.
The fact that we are still in an active time of war, I think you have to be careful.
With less than 1 week before the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks in New York City, is the U.S. in a position to prevent another attack?
The FBI has 80 offices outside the United States. They're in constant contact with their counterparts and trying to see if anybody anywhere is picking up anything about a possible attack.
One potential threat, the seemingly increasing number of terrorists now with Western passports. But according to experts, there's an even greater imminent concern. Wannabe terrorists could already be here in the U.S. People who don't even have to get on a plane, but can just read an online terror magazine in English, which includes how-to guides on building bombs, and makes outright threats against cities such as Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and big events happening now like the U.S. Open. What I'm saying is when MIT graduate and al-Qaeda suspect Afia Siddiqui was arrested in 2008, investigators found handwritten notes in her purse referring to mass casualty attacks at locations in New York, including the Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty, and the Brooklyn Bridge, where security was recently breached when its U.S. flags were replaced by bleached white flags. Even though ISIS has never carried out an attack in the West, some experts believe it would not tread on al-Qaeda's 9/11 date, because its leader al-Baghdadi wouldn't want to.
He's very narcissistic, and many believe that that he may not want to do an attack on 9/11's anniversary because of being in competition with the legacy of Osama bin Laden. He wants his own legacy. He wants to be regarded as the biggest, baddest terrorist that ever lived.
But experts say that doesn't mean locations aren't vulnerable now, especially those that draw large crowds, because the ideology, experts say, is like a germ. You can't control it.
You can't quarantine an idea that's spread over thousands of websites, YouTube, and others on the internet. There's no real ability to prevent that message from being spread.
That kind of ideology won't stop Americans either.
Are we safe anywhere? I don't know, but I can't live my life like that. I don't want my children to grow up with fear. I want them to feel safe in school. I want them to feel safe before the U.S. Open. I want them to feel safe in the park.
There's risk every day you walk out your door. You got to have, to some degree, have faith in those that your taxpayer dollars kind of go to protect you, and you got to live your life.
Gene Casares, CNN, New York.
So if you live here in New York, or if you've been here in the subway system, the row passengers are constantly warned, if you see something, say something. Every one of us has to be on our toes. And one Texas sheriff says he is ready for ISIS. We're joined now by Sheriff Gary Painter of Midland County, Texas. Good evening, Sheriff.
Good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. I hope you're great as well. You have said that you want to be ready in case of an attack by ISIS or by any other terror group. What's your biggest concern?
Well, the fact that they're already here. That's the biggest thing. I worked the border for about 8 years. There's places on the border that you can walk across upriver from Presidio. There's no water in the river.
There's no fences. There's nothing to keep you out. So, and we've got, what, 10 to 15 million that are undocumented aliens that are inside the United States now. And there's no doubt that there have been some people come in that should not be here, that are from places other than Mexico or Hispanic states.
You said that they're already here. Why do you believe they're already here? You believe ISIS is already here?
I believe they have cells here. I believe they have people here. They have cohorts. They have people that are here that are going to throw in with them. I believe you have some homegrown people that are going to get mixed up, and we've already seen them in Syria where they've been killed and identified as being from the United States. So I think it'd be naive to say that they're not here.
But your own Governor Rick Perry recently said that individuals from ISIS or other terrorist states could be coming across the Mexican border, but the Pentagon officials have told CNN there's no information that leads us to believe that ISIS is a quote, ISIS was crossing at the U.S.-Mexican border. So are you concerned at all that you might be scaring your own citizens because you're saying you believe that they're already here?
I think our citizens are aware that there's a strong possibility that these individuals are already here. Sure, there's not positive proof, but how many people knew there was 10 to 15 million undocumented aliens? How do you prove that? We have people that are in this United States on visas, student visas, work visas, that have never reported in. They've had no one to check them, no one that can identify that they're still here illegally until they get stopped by law enforcement or something by chance happens. So
my question was that do you believe that you're scaring your citizens is what it,
I don't think, no, I think they're aware of the reality that there's probably some people here. There may be some people that get scared, and I'm sorry for that, but the reality is that we're looking at square in the face.
So Sheriff, you have a department there with 100 deputies. How does a department in Midland, Texas prepare for ISIS?
Well, we go through emergency management training twice a year. We have different scenarios that we go through. We get involved with other agencies, state, federal, and other local agencies, as well as agencies from the outside. We work with hospitals, emergency management groups, ambulances, air evacs, all kinds of people, and we get prepared for different kinds of scenarios. Law enforcement, you have to work with each other. There's no way that you can do your job without depending on the public, without depending on each other. So we always work and go hand in hand with trying to help each other out.
And we also understand that you received an intelligence briefing about ISIS. What specifically did it tell you?
Just that information came in about 3 or 4 days ago that there was a suspected cells of ISIS that was in Juarez, Mexico, that they were operating. They were moving through that country, and there was some activity going on. And it warned us to be on the lookout for it, to be expect something, and be careful with the law enforcement officers around the border and within close proximity to the border.
So quickly, what's your message to if there are ISIS fighters who may already be in the United States or in your area who've crossed across the border? What's your message to them?
Well, if they rear their ugly head, we'll send them to hell.
That puts a
pretty
pretty
much
fine point on it, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff Painter.
Thanks
Sheriff
so
Gary,
much.
Gary Painter. You know, you've heard what the sheriff thinks, but are ISIS terrorists already here in the United States? We'll get some answers from the experts.
Sheriff, thank you for being here. What are you hearing? What is this alert about?
Well, I received an intelligence report that said that there was ISIS cells that were active in the Juarez area, which is northern part of Chihuahua State, and that they were moving around over there, that they had just that there was some activity, and for the sheriffs along the border to be on the alert, for all law enforcement to be on the alert, and to be on the lookout for these people maybe trying to come across.
Are you saying that ISIS is ready to come across, poised to perhaps execute what they have threatened to do, attacks on the United States, drown us in our own blood? Is that what you are saying?
Well, I'm saying the border is wide open. There is no control on the border. It's not shut off. There's places along the Rio Grande you can walk across. There's no water in it. I worked the border for 8 years. I walked back and forth across the Rio Grande. I was in Mexico. I was on this side and never got challenged. And there's always a way to get across. There's coyotes on the side of the road or side of the trail. So we know that there are Muslims that have come across and being smuggled in the United States.
What is your message for the White House? And what is your message for ISIS, ISIL, and terror cells in the making?
If they show their ugly head in our area, we'll send them to hell. And I think the United States need to get busy. And they need to bomb them. They need to take them out. I would like for them to hit them so hard and so often that every time they hear a propeller on a plane or a jet aircraft engine that they urinate down both legs. When you do that, then you've accomplished a lot. And I think General Allen being in charge of it, United States Marine Corps, I think we're going to have, if they'll let him go, let him do what needs to be done. If they'll hit him and hit him hard and hit him often, we need to shut him off. We need to kill him.
I'll give you a big copy of that, Sheriff Painter. We thank you for being with Fox and Friends with us.
Thank you so much for sticking with us now. Now, I'm not racist. I have no problem, as I've mentioned on past shows, legal immigration. That's beneficial to everybody. But you have to go through the channels of legality, just as these other folks have done over the years to get their green card. And folks that I've discussed immigration with in general, and I'd say realistically at least 90% of folks that currently have a green card have told me that they believe, especially since they went through the legal channels and having to do this, that they do feel it's only fair for other immigrants and folks to do the same thing that they had to do, which is to become a legal U.S. citizen. So most of us really do see eye to eye. It is about equality. It is. But it's not about free rides at the expense of tax-paying American citizens for folks that haven't earned their right to be a United States citizen. We're a great nation, but if you want to be called a U.S. citizen and wear our flag, you got to earn it. And that's how it is here. The rule of law will stand and will prevail. So, let's go on with the news articles. What would be, in the month of August alone, there were 418 cases of illegals raping children in the state of North Carolina alone. 418 cases of children being molested in 1 month by illegal aliens alone. So you really want to move these people up here? It's not about Mexicans. A lot of these people coming up here, like I said, they're not even Mexicans. Some of them are from overseas. Some of them are Al-Qaeda, ISIS terrorists. Some of these folks are from Guatemala and Central America. And you know what they're actually doing right now? They're sending up on trains some of their problem children. They're sending some of the worst to the United States. People that don't function properly in society. Mental rejects, criminals, felons, rapists. So you want to welcome those people into our country? You've been complaining about life not being spicy and exciting enough? Just wait till these people start raping their way and bombing their way and killing their way through your town and state. Trust me. Oh, it won't be about racism. You'll be wanting these people out of your state and town real quick. Does anybody want to bring people over, illegals, that are going to bring a bunch of crime and problems with them? No. And if they can't do the legal stuff to begin with to become a U.S. citizen, then that means they're not going to respect the rule of law in any other way either. And if they know to begin with, they come to the United States and they don't have to respect the rule of law, they don't have to respect the basic initiation and basic variables, then why would they adhere to any other laws or rules? They didn't have to start out doing that. So after living lawless for so long, they're going to assume they can just get away with it. Well, this is what I think. When ISIS and folks pop up in your town, don't just wait for the police. You get a posse going, you get armed, you man up, you load up some shotguns, and you go down and you handle business. We're at a point in the road, folks, when you can't wait for government just to come and save me. I'm out here where a cell phone don't work. So what do I have on me? A .45 pistol. Why is that? Because this keeps me safe. Hollow point shells. Pop goes the weasel. I might have long hair. They may call me a hippie. But I've got the ability to protect my own. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I believe in being a man. I believe in stepping up for my community, for my family, and whatever. I'm not going to bend over and beg a robber or a rapist to be nice. No, I'm going to pull out the gun and bust a cat. I've got a shotgun. I've got an AK-47, and that's my favorite gun. Of all my weapons, my AK-47 Saiga Russian AK-47 works like a charm. I can hit pop cans at a distance you wouldn't believe. Maybe on the next show I'll have to show you some video footage and have a little fun with Second Amendment. So, a recent survey has found that Democrats believe that the threat posed by climate change is greater than the threat posed by either Al-Qaeda or the IS, Islamic State, ISIS terrorists, in Syria, as they label them. So, this is a very interesting situation. President Karzai of Afghanistan's farewell speech stated that the U.S. did not want peace in Afghanistan. He said if America wanted peace, whatnot, if America and Pakistan really wanted it, peace will come to Afghanistan. That's what Karzai said. Pentagon using F-22s used in combat for the first time in what would be Syria, as I mentioned. So like I stated earlier, the bombing campaign of President Obama in Syria finally got the blessing of the American people. Now that ISIS is going to get us. Wait a minute, didn't the president just fund ISIS? Yes, he did. He did. This is very confusing, folks. I'd love to sit here and go into like an hour-long description of little fine details of ISIS and ISIL, and I could do it, but most of you really don't care about the little fine details. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to give you a quick rundown. The government is pimping and playing all sides of this. We don't have full control over ISIS, but we have wound them up. And we're giving them money, and we have people arming and helping and doing things to help bolster their courage and cause that they want to bring here. And they even stated that they want to have their flag hanging over the White House. That's right. They want Sharia law here. They want women not having any rights. Now you talk about women's rights and you think women this and women that. You think it's bad here in America, women? You think you don't have equal rights and wages and this and that? Oh, just bring in Al-Qaeda and ISIS and see how much rights you got. You won't even be able to let that long hair hang out and show in the sunshine at what would be Bumbershoot in Seattle in September time, or an Ozzy concert, Disturbed, or anything else. Why? Because you'll have to have your face all wrapped up because it's Sharia law. Now, yeah, you won't have any rights. You go to a police officer and say that he was just raped by some guy, they'll say, oh, well, men have all the rights now because that's how it is. That's what you will see. It will be martial, not even martial law, it'll be hell on earth. You don't want these people bringing their hell. Here, let me tell you, assure you right now. Robert Kennedy's Jr. is obsessed with the notion that what would be vaccines cause autism. So we have some mainstream figures and folks coming out to discuss the vaccine issue. Small business ownership in America is at an all-time low. Every 40 seconds, global suicide rates, there's a suicide and global suicide rates at 800,000 per year, the World Health Organization has stated. This is official. We have no idea how many people just pop a few too many pills one night and make it look like they accidentally overdosed. So it's 800, what would be 1,000 a year officially. So you know that number has to be low. That's the only ones that they got enough proof, such as razor blade wrist or something like that, or a neck, or a rope around your neck that you hung yourself. Now, what would be, we want to discuss lies. We want to discuss truth. Sometimes you have to see, kind of like the last month's show, where I showed you Obama saying one thing, you could take this to the bank. Once I'm president, the troops are out of Iraq. And then you get to see him 2 months ago saying that we're going to continue our presence in Iraq. Kind of like how lately he said there'll be no boots on the ground in Iraq, and then CNN stated there are boots. Now even Obama says, well, there are boots in Iraq, but they won't be used in any live military operation. So see how the story changes a little bit. There's no boots. Well, there are boots, but the boots won't be used for war. Well, okay, they're being used for war, but we won't send any more than this amount of troops, they'll say next. Okay, well, we will send a little bit extra, and we do need more money, but it's just a little bit here or there. They give you a little bit because they have to give a little bit because they're getting caught. It's interesting. We're in a situation, folks, where if you don't care about these other people across the way, if you don't care about what's happening in the world, you don't care about the fact we're stepping on the brimstone of hell with what would be World War III with Russia and China, if that doesn't ring your bell, if the economy is not hurting you enough at home to care, if you really don't care, then I can assure you what's coming down the pipeline, from extreme terrorism crime, from ISIS, ISIL, to a pandemic disease, to the economy coming down and taking away your pensions, 401ks, and personal bank account money, to whatever. Your job, your farm, your thing. Personal businesses are at an all-time low. You think this economy's bad? Here's a forecast I'm going to give you today. Over the next 3 years, you're going to be calling the days of 2014 under Obama the good old days. That's right. This is the good old days. So if you're getting depressed and you think things are hard, oh, trust me, this is a charm. However you're living at home, however bare bones your fridge looks, this is as fat as you're going to be in comparison to 3 years from now. So you better deal with that reality. And if you don't, then you can talk about the Seahawks. You can talk about the Chicago Bulls. You can talk about the little frivolous things all you want to talk about. You can talk about the things that only affect your side. Many Republicans only like Republican manners and only like people who act and talk as Republicans. Many on the left side only like Democrats. This is and that's. And you know what's funny, as I mentioned to what would be a doctor lately. Actually, she was a nurse. As I stated to her at her office, I said, one thing I've learned about politics is most people really don't care about the truth. They care about finding the people that's going to tell them what they want to hear. And that's when she fired back and said, well, I'm for women's rights, so I always vote for the left. And that it was kind of her way of basically, the mask came off and it's like, yeah, okay, Kari, you know what I'm saying and what I'm doing, so here we go. And she let me know. Because she's a woman, she cares about the women's rights. I'm gathering she probably had an abortion or two when she was young, so she needs to see abortion legal to help justify her, to help make her feel good. And some women and people, older women that may be over 40 or older, that maybe in their 60s or 70s that had an abortion back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, some of these people want to see abortion still around, as I mentioned, because if it becomes illegal and outlawed, that makes them look like killers, murderers, and of the old breed and bad people. So long as they know women are still getting abortions, it justifies it and makes them feel okay and able to live with that burden of sin on their head. Now, Obama lies. Let's see his list of lies. Let's just see a few of them. Let's see Obama say one thing, say something else, do this, do that. You need to see it. I've got the proof and video footage. Let's check it out, and we will see you here in a few minutes.
We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna change it, baby.
The only major candidate who hold this war from the beginning. And as president, I will end it. This is why, as president, I will make the fight against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban the top priority that it should be. Second, I will cut tens of billions of dollars in wasteful spending. That's why I've proposed an additional $1 billion in non-military assistance each year. I will cut investments in unproven missile defense systems. I will not weaponize space. I will slow our development of future combat systems. We need more troops, more helicopters, more satellites, more Predator drones in the Afghan border region. Now, I had no doubt, and I said at the time, when I opposed the surge, that given how wonderfully our troops perform, if we place 30,000 more troops in there, then we would see an improvement in the security situation and we would see a reduction in the violence. We can send 15,000 more troops, 20,000 more troops, 30,000 more troops. I don't know any expert on the region or any military officer that I've spoken to privately that believes that that is going to make a substantial difference on the situation on the ground. I've always said that the pace of withdrawal would be dictated by the safety and security of our troops and the need to maintain stability. That assessment has not changed. To end this war, I have seen no information that contradicts
the notion that we can bring our troops out safely at a pace of 1 to 2 brigades per month. And again, that pace translates into having our combat troops out in 16 months.
Those are not statements that I ever heard when I was sitting in the pews at this church. Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes.
You can walk out of a church. I mean, you can go up to a pastor and say, this is wrong.
And as I said, Anderson, if I had heard any of these statements, I probably would have walked out, and I probably would have told Reverend Wright that they were wrong. But they were not statements that I heard when I was in church.
So no one...
Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes.
If the government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America, no, no, no. Not God Bless America, God Damn America. That's it.
I don't think that my church is actually particularly controversial.
Will you as president say, we are out of NAFTA in 6 months?
I've said that I will renegotiate NAFTA, so obviously you'd have to say to Canada and Mexico that that's exactly what we're going to do.
And I think actually Senator Clinton's answer on this one is right.
But how much of that bluster is real? CTV News has learned that within the last month, a senior member of the Barack Obama campaign telephoned the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Michael Wilson. In that call, the Obama operative warned the ambassador that NAFTA would become part of the debate in the Democratic primaries and that Obama would take some heavy swings at the trade deal, but told the ambassador, don't worry, it's just campaign rhetoric. It's not serious. It goes to the question of truthfulness. In other words, did Barack Obama say one thing privately to a foreign government and then say something entirely different to the voters of Ohio and Texas? And it appears that tonight that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly...
In a TV ad in Pennsylvania on his energy proposals, Barack Obama says, quote, I don't take money from oil companies. The truth is, no candidate takes money from oil companies directly because it's illegal to accept donations from corporations.
A quote today from Senator Barack Obama, which puzzled me. He said that we should have sex education in kindergarten. I'm not kidding you. And I scratch my head as I hear that. Sex education in kindergarten.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, you know, which I didn't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do. My view on FISA has always been that this administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not. The issue of the phone companies per se, no more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. It is a close call for me. There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
You will not see a dime of increased taxes. Not one dime. Not your payroll tax. The best idea, I think, is to raise the cap on the payroll tax. Not your income tax.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, isn't it?
Not your capital gains tax.
Why would you want to increase anybody's taxes right now? Why would you want to do that? Anyone in America. When we have such a tough time, when these small business people like Joe the plumber are going to create jobs, unless you take that money from him and spread the wealth around.
I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. I think when you spread the wealth around.
His campaign tried to clean up a sizable Memorial Day gaffe about his family's role in liberating a notorious Nazi concentration camp.
I had a uncle who was one of the who was part of the first American troops to go into Auschwitz.
Obama's point dealt with the need for more mental health services for today's veterans, but it was built on false history, both about his family and World War II. First, Obama didn't have an uncle who served in the U.S. Army. Second, Russian forces liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland in January of 1945. Obama's dubious claim is inconsistent with world history and demands an explanation, the Republican National Committee said in a statement. Obama's frequent exaggerations and outright distortions raise questions about his judgment and his readiness to lead as Commander-in-Chief.
Christ into my life, I learned that my sins could be redeemed, and that if I placed my trust in Jesus, then he could set me on a path to eternal life. When I submitted myself to his will,
I can't simply point to the teachings of my church or evoke God's will.
It was that newfound faith that fortified my commitment.
Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, with eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith, to the Sermon on the Mount. A passage that is so radical that it's doubtful that our own Defense Department would survive its application.
As the world knows, will never start a war.
Leading Democratic presidential candidate Senator Barack Obama issued a warning to Pakistan today, saying
he would be prepared to order military attacks against Al-Qaeda targets inside Pakistan.
President Bashar will not act. We will.
Pakistan, being a sovereign country, will never allow any other country to send troops to its territory for any purpose.
If President Bashar will not act, we will.
If you look at Obama's voting record, I mean, he has voted to, not to end the war. He has voted to finance the war. So his rhetoric is playing to the people that come my way, but he is every bit as much of an intervention. He wants to send more troops into Afghanistan. He wants to broaden the military stuff. I think it's a fraud what he's talking about when he wants to really get out of Iraq.
I do not share his views with respect to Israel. I have said so clearly and unequivocally.
To Dr. Brzezinski, I can't say enough about his contribution to our country. He is one of our most outstanding scholars, one of our most outstanding thinkers. He has proven to be an outstanding friend and somebody who I've learned an immense amount from.
America has been hijacked. Stop oil company.
And thanks for coming back. So this is what people have to see. They have to see Obama say one thing and do another. They have to see that they voted for this person. They were fooled twice, or at least once, and went with the better of two evils, or this is or that. But this is what they have to see. Most liberal Democrat, Obama lovers, so on and so forth, they don't want to have this conversation. But they all know, in general, maybe a few percentile don't know because they're too dumb or they're too wealthy to feel the burn that's happening in real America. But in general, we all know this economy is not getting any better. There's a few sectors and a few individual businesses here or there that's making a few more dollars than they did before. Hyperinflated dollars. But in general, for every business that's coming up and doing good and prospering, you got 10 to 15 more businesses that are going down the tubes, hanging on death row, like someone in a coma. Which was a actual warning and a forecast that I gave to what would be a current construction worker from the Camino Island area, which we watch in the show. I stated to him that he should consider the circumstances because in a few years from now, his business probably won't be there as well. As I mentioned about a coma patient living on death row, basically hanging on a whim of life support. Bill Gates and his wife give $1 million to gun control push. Judicial Watch states that imminent terrorist attack warning by feds on U.S. border. California federal judge rules that a 10-day waiting period for the state of California is unconstitutional when it comes to getting your guns. Judicial Watch federal attorney says backup of Lois Lerner emails do exist. What would be Bank of America agrees to a record $17 billion settlement over mortgage fraud. That's right, Bank of America has frauded many of you out of your own homes. They told you that you owed them more than you did. They played with your payment, some of you. They played with your interest. They convinced you. Some of them, they came to your house and gave you a $2,000 check and said, if you get out of here in the next week, just take the check and let us have the home. And some people are like, okay. And since they hadn't made a house payment in 2 years, they figured, hey, take the $2,000 and whatever. But they hustled you. So, it is what it is. Pot use in what would be Colorado teens appears to have dropped after legalization. Hit it. The Washington, D.C. City Council voted and approved what would be the concealed weapons aspect and permit, so people can have a concealed weapons pistol within the city limits for protection in Washington, D.C., the capital, which is actually a crime-ridden city. And that's positive and great. And I already stated on a past show that even if it was considered so-called illegal by the city as acting congressman when I get elected, I would carry a pistol on me because the Second Amendment in the Constitution states that I can. And even the Supreme Court verified that, what would be a couple of years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional what Washington, D.C. was doing, and they just ignored it for a while. So I'm glad that we now have enough heat on the situation, and I do believe one of the things that potentially helped lead to this could be, even though it seemed a bit fringe for him to do this, I will acknowledge, but it was I think the meaning behind it, which would be Adam Kokesh loading the shotgun in what would be Washington, D.C. So while it did seem a bit fringe, it was a gesture of the Constitution and a point that he was trying to make under the circumstances. So at this point, I'm going to read to you a letter, an email letter that I sent to Congressman Rick Larsen here in the 2nd District of Washington State. I'm going to read this to you. I sent this to him on the 16th of September, a week before what would be the vote in which he still supported ISIS terrorists and voted for that. And remember that someday when American troops, not just here in Washington State, get murdered and citizens and so on and so forth. Remember, he is complicit with these crimes of murder, terrorism, and treason. And we will go into what will be my letter that I sent to Mr. Larsen. The message subject is, what will troops say when they discover Representative Rick Larsen funded Syrian rebels, ISIS terrorists? Mr. Larsen, on July 29, 2014, just before going on recess, you signed onto House Res 105 to effectively put President Obama in check by making it clear, according to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it is Congress that decides when to go to war and not the President. 1 week later, the President defied the Congress once again and sent troops in. And according to CNN, there are actual U.S. boots on the ground, contrary to the President's lies. Now you know, Rick, you either begin to support the impeachment of President Obama to protect your own skin, or face your political career going down the tube shortly alongside of him as you cater to his demands in which clearly have violated the oath of office and rule of law. Now, President Obama himself has personally just asked Congress for an additional $500 million to fund moderate Syrian rebels, unquote. The Congress is funding terrorists called ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda, Mujahideen, etc., which violates the international and sovereign nation-states laws. With all due respect, Congressman Rick Larsen, you have literally funded and bankrolled terrorist organizations in which have murdered U.S. citizens, troops, former Ambassador Chris Stevens in Libya, in which have also threatened to bring radical Islam and violence to the streets of the United States according to their very own accord. So, When these terrorists do strike U.S. citizens within the United States using money, arms, and logistics in which you provided for them, Mr. Larson, you will personally be responsible for acts of terrorism, treason, and complicit in the murder of U.S. civilians and troops. Remember what I said a few years ago about a new Nazi-style trial coming from members of Congress who supported bailouts, wars, and treason? Well, apparently those days are coming closer. The people are waking up fast to the games and lies. Better be honest now or risk losing it all, Rick. Know when to say when. From economist Kari Ilonummi of NoSpinNewsSource.com. That's my letter to Rick Larson. Pretty potent. That letter's going out all over the place, all over, along with other variables. We're at an interesting, crucial point in the road, folks, where you have to stand up for something or you'll fall for anything. And if you don't learn to have some courage now and stand up, trust me, evil only gets stronger when you turn a blind eye. This corruption only gets worse. Moving on to the show. Obama at another fundraiser hails American leadership at its best. That's right. So after what would be Congress giving the blessing to Obama to give them half $500 million, $500 million to ISIS terrorists, Obama came on there and said that, quote, so what we have seen is American leadership at its best, unquote. That's an exact quote of Obama. Now, if you call this American leadership at its best, I sure hate to see it at its worst, with all due respect, Mr. President. Now, here we are, as I mentioned. Very interesting point in the road, things happening every which way. Where are we going to go? It's not up to me, it's not up to the government, it's up to you. So if you're going to sit back and just watch Seahawks and don't care, well, you're going to have a government that doesn't care too. So a lot of the stuff, we kind of deserve. We don't care. We don't learn. We've given up. Many of you had hope and optimism when Obama came into office. Now you lost your hope, you don't care, you're pessimistic, you're depressed, you just don't want to talk about it. Hey, turn a blind eye. Keep walking backward and see if you don't fall off the cliff. So, President Obama praises Congress for catering to him at a fundraiser, as we know. And Health Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell said at a speech at the Brookings Institute on Tuesday that, quote, the Affordable Care Act is working. Yeah, it's working. If you want it to work to destroy the nation, it's working like a charm. Let's check out these videos and we'll see you right back after this break.
And I want to take this opportunity to apply that analytical framework to the issue of healthcare. And as we think about the question of how is the Affordable Care Act working? And then I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I'm thinking about the steps as we go forward. As someone who's managed across business, government, and large philanthropies, I've come to believe strongly in the importance of measurable impact. And when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, I think there are three basic measures. They are access, affordability, and quality. Are more people getting covered? Access and affordability. Are middle-class families shielded from suffocating medical bills? Affordability. Are we spending our dollars more wisely, both quality and affordability? And to all of these questions, I would submit that the answer is yes. When you consider the law through the lens of affordability, access, and quality, the evidence points to a clear conclusion. The Affordable Care Act is working, and families, businesses, and taxpayers are better off as
passed. Just before speeding out of Washington for the midterm elections, Congress gave President Obama the green light to arm and train Syrian rebels in the war on ISIS.
The strong bipartisan support in Congress for this new training effort shows the world that Americans are united in confronting the threat from ISIL.
The Senate approved the measure attached to a must-pass spending bill by an overwhelming margin, but potential GOP presidential contenders were divided, with Senator Marco Rubio voting yes and Ted Cruz and Rand Paul saying no. Noting that Congress declined to authorize the president's overall strategy, Paul dubbed Mr. Obama's battle plan one man's war.
He was running against the wars of the previous administration. And people voted for him for that very reason, and he became part of the problem.
Despite the endorsement from Congress for at least part of the president's strategy, lawmakers were voicing doubts to Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel.
If this plan doesn't work, what is the alternative? What does it look like in the Middle East then? Well,
we always have plan Bs and Cs. That's what the military does as well as anybody in the world. But we believe this plan will work.
The Obama administration is pointing to the stepped-up air campaign against ISIS that U.S. military officials say took out a terrorist training camp in some of the latest strikes.
I can tell you that I don't think these guys are 10 feet tall. And the intelligence tells us that as we've begun to hit them, we've been able to prove that to some degree.
President Obama welcomed France's decision to join the coalition in conducting airstrikes on ISIS, a sign the battle against the terrorist group is just heating up.
As Americans, we do not give in to fear. And when you harm our citizens, when you threaten the United States, when you threaten our allies, it doesn't divide us, it unites us.
And the French government has confirmed in just the last several minutes that its warplanes are now conducting airstrikes alongside the U.S.
And welcome back to the show. Seeing is believing. And you know, I have to give some credit right now, actually, to what would be a group of high school cheerleader girls out of what would be Tennessee, actually, Oneida, Tennessee, that actually defied what would be the rule there that goes against what would be a prayer, ultimately. And they went against what would be the prayer ban. And they did a prayer before what would be the game. Now, people say, how revolutionary is that, Kari? All these girls did was just stand in a circle and say a prayer. But you got to think about the bigger picture. First of all, these are teenage girls, 14 to 18 years old, having to work so hard to get on the cheer team to begin with. Your popularity, your reputation, everything. It's all tied in with that, your identity. When you're that young, you're very impressionable. You care what people think about you. You don't want to be a loser. You don't want to be kicked off for the team. You work so hard to watch your weight, to watch your looks and everything, and to be as pretty and beautiful and wonderful as you can be, in good shape. These girls knew they were risking their potential ability to do what they love to do, dance and represent their school. So I give these girls credit. I think these girls are rather revolutionary. I think they have a lot of courage to do what they did, to risk potentially being terminated from the cheer team, because that is what could happen, and they knew that. So God bless you girls, and I have a feeling somebody up there is going to bless you too, because that took courage and guts right there. I mean, honestly, I know people here in the state of Washington that don't have the guts to do what those teenage girls just did. So, Google severs ties with conservative group over climate change stance. That's right. Those climate deniers, you gotta watch out for them. So now it's at the point where they're calling upon burning their houses down, killing them, imprisoning them, not doing business with them. You can't have your own opinion anymore. You're either with us or against us, I guess. Anyway, very, very interesting. Now, Vladimir Putin warns of nuclear war if Russia is threatened. And that is something that needs to be discussed right now. And a Walgreens pharmacist got fired after using his concealed weapons handgun to fight off armed robbers at the store. So we're here at the end of the show. It's October. It's 2014. This is the monthly report for nospendnewssource.com. We will be back next month. And for the next several months, we'll be back in the studio. The weather is changing, and I didn't expect to have a sunny day at the very end of September to record the October show as we did today. So I expected to be at the studio today. But anyway, it's the greater Seattle area of the Pacific Northwest, so what do you expect, huh? Beautiful, wonderful place. God bless each and every one of you. I'm doing what I can do to provide you with the best show I can do. I'm far from perfect, folks. But let me tell you, if I was here for popularity, for money, for any of this or that, or something silly, I wouldn't be doing what I do, which is sometimes looking silly with some of these news articles and fringe topics that I'm forced to discuss. I don't claim to be perfect, but one thing about my accuracy, forecasting, politics and economics, it is literally 99% accurate. So when you hear things that you think are fringe or out there, just because they haven't happened yet to you doesn't mean they will not happen in the future. And if my track record's 99% in the past, over the last 8 years, and I'm just a 31-year-old man, the United States Congress has called me in to advise them, literally, that guy, Representative Rick Larson, yeah, 2 years ago at 29 years old, in my 20s, being asked to advise the Congress. The Busso party of the German parliament discussing me in a paper publication. Folks such as Yngwie Malmsteen, guitar virtuoso, retweeting news articles, and financial institutions following on Twitter to this and that. Things are building step by step. Light shines. People are either very attracted to the truth or they...
I feared for my life.
In May, 2 armed men entered a Walgreens in Benton Harbor where Jeremy Hoven worked. Surveillance video shows them take a manager hostage, then push him to the back of the store where Hoven was working as a pharmacist.
The gunman repeatedly attempted to fire upon me.
In this edited security footage given to WZZM 13 News from Hoven's attorney, you can see a masked man leap over the counter, weapon drawn.
In self-defense, I fired my weapon.
And the crooks ran off. In a press conference on Wednesday, the overnight pharmacist says he has a permit for that weapon, but a week later was fired.
Mr. Hoven, by way of this lawsuit, is challenging Walgreens' right to fire him for exercising his right of self-defense.
Hoven's attorney says a Walgreens district manager fired the pharmacist based on a non-escalation policy.
As we stand here today, neither Jeremy nor I have ever seen that policy.
A statement from Walgreens to WZZM 13 News says employees go through extensive training in crisis situations and are told to be compliant.
That makes for a really interesting case, you know, with potentially national importance.
Cooley Law professor Derek Whitty says in Michigan, anyone is allowed to carry a weapon with the proper permit unless it is written anywhere in the company's policy.
The legal issues are really going to stand against, you know, what potentially was an act of heroism, and I don't know that it'll go away as easily as Walgreens would like.